the Brubacher and Beyond podcast. We are shaping the world we live in, making the construction industry uncommonly refreshing. I'm your host, Chris Senelovich, and today we are with Charlie Bagnell with Aztec Corporation, and we will be discussing the Peterson division, but we will be talking overall about all the equipment that Charlie oversees. And with that, I will let my guest introduce himself. Good afternoon. Thank you for making the drive to Bowmansville. We appreciate it.
Hey, thanks very much, Chris, for having me. I appreciate you guys taking the time.
Today, we are going to talk about equipment. I think if you're old enough to remember, I'm trying to think of what that episode with that he would grunt in the background with. Oh man, what was his name?
Oh, Tim the
Toolman
Home
Taylor.
Improvement.
There you go. Home Improvement. Tim the Toolman Taylor. Talk about horsepower, but that's the first thing that I'll say. I mean, the grinder that we purchased, if you think about it, is over 1,000 horsepower.
Yes, 1,125.
There you go. I mean, that's a lot of engine. That's a lot of moving parts. That's a lot of everything. But before we get into that, I don't want to get ahead. Charlie, introduce yourself. The platform's yours.
Okay. So my name's Charlie Bagnell. I'm the Regional Sales Director for Aztec Industries. I have been with Aztec for 15 years. So I came originally, I was born and grew up actually in Ireland. And I grew up on a dairy farm of all things. And I emigrated to America in 1994. So I'm actually in my 30th this month, or in May, I'll be here in America 30 years. I live here in Pennsylvania. I got into the equipment business in 1995 by just a chance meeting with a gentleman that owned a screener company in northeastern Pennsylvania in a bar, and before you knew it, I was working in the screener industry like every other Irish guy. And so from there, I've moved in actually to later in my career, moved into the forestry industry, and came to work for Peterson in 2008, covering the whole Northeast. Basically, I cover from Chicago through to the East Coast, Eastern Canada, all the way down to South Carolina. And I have a team of 4 salespeople that work with me, and they do a fantastic job. The different products we represent is the Peterson product. We also have our road building products, which is Road Tech pavers, milling machines, shuttle buggies, and we also have our commercial pavers, which is the Carlson commercial pavers, doing your driveways and stuff like that. So those are the 3 product lines we represent, and we work with about 22 different dealers throughout that whole region. With the Peterson product here in Pennsylvania, we work with Cleveland Brothers, the Caterpillar dealer, who have been a partner of ours since 2009. So they're in their 15th year. Yeah, they're in their 15th year now of working with Peterson. On top of that, not to spout too much about Cleveland Brothers, but they have been one of our largest stocking dealers for parts for Peterson for probably over the last 10 years. They've been a phenomenal partner. We're more than happy to work with them, and their support has been excellent. We couldn't ask for a better partner here in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, that's one of the things we'll touch upon. I will say, a grinder, a screener, all the things that Charlie's talking about, they are wearable items.
Oh, yeah.
Right? They're doing some harsh work, rough work, dirty work.
Mm-hmm.
These machines are not just sitting in the sun, just taking it easy.
No.
These are pieces of equipment that are built to grind, destroy, chew up, all the above, so our infrastructure can keep on moving like we need it to. But I guess it's very coincidental. You find a lot of dairy farmers that switch from the farming business to the equipment business.
I know.
Did you? Was it a big transition for you, or is there a lot of similarity between farming and construction?
Well, the similarity would be being around equipment, being around like stuff that's different from a car, like a tractor, a mower, a hay turner, a planter, combine harvester, etc. So as a kid, like every little boy wants to get on the big piece of equipment and run the equipment and learn how to drive the tractor from a very young age. And I was no different to that. So the opportunity to be able to get into bigger equipment. Now, don't get me wrong, it was a very steep learning curve coming into the construction industry because the requirements are different to what you would need out of farming. The customers are very different too. There are some similarities. Logging customers are very similar to farmers, but your land clearing contractors and excavating companies like Brubacher here would be a different type of customer to deal with. And so that was a bit of a steeper learning curve for me. The other thing as well is the pricing of the equipment is it's quite expensive. I'm not saying farming equipment is very expensive now, but some of the stuff we get into can get pretty pricey. And so there was a mental note of getting over that barrier, like, oh my God, I'm going to ask this person for this amount of money. Are they going to throw me out of their office or whatever?
And that might be a kick in the bucket for them,
yeah.
Or an easy decision. And they might look at it different, like how much can this machine save us in fuel utilization, other manpower, time is money, and all those other things. So definitely is a switch in the thinking process.
And the thing is that that's what you learn. It's all about this contractor is buying this tool for them to either do a better job or a faster job or a more efficient job. And so what we're selling is value for money. That's our whole, that's sort of our thing, is we're trying to sell a piece of equipment that is showing that contractor tremendous value for money. Be it not just in lower operating costs, but in productivity. And then on top of that, if they decide to sell that product way down the line, that there will be a recoup in that investment as well. So those are the different things we look at.
One of the things I learned in sales is it's not my decision to spend the customer's money, right? So your job as a salesperson, I look at it as to inform the customer the features and the benefits and his options. Sometimes you do compare your competitors to your equipment, and you say, well, they might do something different than this piece, but as a salesperson, it's your job to inform the customer and let the customer make the decision. Is it too much money or not?
Absolutely. So we try to view our roles, even though we have the term sales right in my title, but our role is much more of an advisory role.
Because you're one person, then you have 4 sales people under you, and then they have 22 dealers. Each dealer has how many sales reps per deal? So you're really informing and helping hundreds of people,
right,
to develop and train them so they can inform customers. But
say down at the molecular level, let's say either our dealer salesperson or one of our salespeople, if they're coming in to help to assist that dealer, the role should be advisory. And what do I mean by that? So look at the breadth of the job or the work that contractor is looking at, and what will be the best tool. We may have that tool and we may not. And a great salesperson should be able to turn around to that customer and say, let's say if it's something that their machine can't do, a good salesperson will say, my equipment can't do that.
Yes.
But I know where you could get one. It may not be one coming from us, maybe from a competitor or whatever. But the idea is that salesperson can be a trusted source for that customer, that the customer can rely upon and say, I can call them and they're going to give me the straight deal on this. Basically show them, back to your point, knowing the features and benefits of their product, but also knowing the features and benefits of other products in the field that can help that customer.
So, so just a quick glimpse, probably people see your position and say, I want to be Charlie in 35 years. What are the things that, like, I'm sure you travel a lot. You're away a lot.
I do.
You miss some family functions because of it.
I do.
So those are the things, though, too. If you are looking into getting into sales, you really need to think about, do you want to be a local sales rep, a regional sales rep, or a national sales rep? There's different commitments to those layers.
Absolutely. There's different stresses, and there's different sort of I'm going to say advantages and disadvantages for each level of role. For all salespeople, let's say on the ground level, I call it, where you're calling on different customers every single day, there's still time away from home. to do that, because even if you're working a county or whatever, some customers may not be available till the evening, so you may miss the baseball game, you may miss that soccer game or whatever. So there is that commitment. It is important to understand that level of commitment. But the upside of it is most of our folks that we see on the ground, we call them equipment guys. They're equipment guys. They love the equipment. They love the industry they're in. And so it sort of doesn't feel as much like work when you're enjoying what you're doing. I haven't been in an office. I'm using air quotes, by the way. I haven't been in an actual office in nearly 30 years. And I love that. I do have an office, but I love being out visiting with customers. That's the fun part of it. Being out on a demonstration, being out on a delivery. That's the fun part of the job. Meeting with the customers, seeing they have a problem. Because really, again, when I was talking about the advisory role, a great salesperson should be a problem solver. Yeah. Customer has a problem. Can you come up with a solution? Yeah. And that solution may be yours and it may not be yours. But the great salespeople, when you have somebody that's like that, they make their job look easy. Which is tough, because then their bosses say, well, what are you doing all day? I was out with Brewbachers today. Well, what are you doing?
What are you doing there? Yeah.
But what do you guys talk about? Well, we talk about everything.
Yeah. And if you understand our needs more, it better helps you sell your product.
Yeah.
And I'll say, like, a glimpse into us, right? One of our needs was efficiencies.
Yeah.
Right? We needed more throughput through that machine, whatever that machine was going to be. But one of the biggest decision-making reasons was throughput. So the machine that we ultimately decided on, which was an upgrade from our old machine to this machine, it can throughput more timber through it. Yeah. So at the end of the day, us letting you know that helps with that decision. So you've been in the industry so long, and we did get a chance to do a demo day with our new piece of equipment.
Right.
I'll be posting some videos of the first couple trees going through it, but we're talking about what, a 36-inch? What size tree can we put in this thing?
36 inches is quite easy for that machine. It will open up to 60 inches, so it's 60 by 55 inch opening.
Okay.
So it'll take a fairly sizable piece of wood. Now, in practical terms, though, you're better breaking it down a little bit smaller with a splitter.
Yes.
And that doesn't mean that's not just for our equipment, that's for anybody else's equipment. It just goes through easier. Like rule of thumb for a land clearing operation is every hour you spend splitting wood or splitting stumps is 1 hour less of grinding.
Okay, so there's a ratio.
Yeah.
It's more affordable in that case to split it, better cost efficiencies than running that machine, because running the grinder, let's just talk about it. How much fuel does it run an hour?
So it'll vary. So in a land clearing setting, you're probably about 35 gallons of fuel every hour. If you're making mulch with that machine, so you're grinding it down to a much smaller screen area, you'd be closer to 50 gallons of fuel per hour. So, but especially in a land clearing operation, if you measure the amount of fuel you're burning in an excavator per hour versus the grinder, there's no comparison.
Yes.
And so therefore, if you can reduce the amount of time you're using running the grinder, you're better off.
Yes.
Our whole thing is always analyzing what is the cost per cubic yard or per ton or per hour to run our equipment. How do we measure that based on what the customer is doing. So it's very unique to that customer. The idea is to come up with a cost per hour, how much that machine is going to cost that customer. And anywhere we can find efficiencies, which is outside the grinder, in other words, you're using the stump splitter, reduce the amount of time you're running the grinder, we want to make sure the customer's aware of that.
Yeah, and that's important to have those relationships with your sales rep. If the sales rep is out on your sites, they're really not trying to sell you. They're trying to make you better in efficiencies.
Absolutely.
Hey, you need to downsize that material before you put it in that machine, or have you ever thought of this, or positioning it? I mean, there's things when you position the equipment, the way that the air is blowing that day so you don't clog your screens.
Correct. Yeah.
There's all kinds of things that go into that. And I will say, we have a tremendous clearing crew with Barney that leads that with years and years of experience.
Absolutely.
That knows those little things to do out in the field that maybe people take for granted. But if you're new in the industry, it's important to learn those little things. But it's very important to reduce any amount of wear time on this piece of equipment. So let's just talk. I'll give you the floor.
Yeah.
We purchased the 5710.
Yeah, it's
so describe that unit to everybody who can picture this in their
so the
mind.
5710E model. So it's our latest one. It's the E model. Is a 1,125 horsepower grinder. It essentially takes big wood and makes it into little wood, but you can grind other things other than wood as well.
So what else can you grind in that?
You can grind roofing shingles with it, which can be used to mix in with hot mix asphalt.
Okay.
We have ground up things like the blades off of a
windmill?
Windmill, yes. Windmill blades. We've done compost, we've done food waste, we've done garbage, we've done demolition work, we've done railroad ties. There's many different types of product you can put through that machine.
Okay.
So we've done gypsum board as well and drywall. So there's quite a wide variety. And the thing is that this comes back to when we send out our technical sales folks, that their job is to really hone in on exactly what that customer wants. But with the 5710E, it's we launched this machine last year at ConExpo, and it was the evolution of our previous model called the D model. And so the D was extremely successful machine for us. It was actually one of the most successful models we had ever put out. And so we had to be super careful on not changing the design, but advancing this design. So we actually put together a team called a CAG, we call them, which is a customer advisory group. And they were made up of 12 different customers from all parts of the country, and with all different types of applications. And we would get together with them on a video conference call about once a month. And we did meet with them in person and as well about once a quarter, and get their ideas of what they wanted out of a machine.
What are things that people want out of it?
Well, number one was safety. They wanted the machine safer. Number two was they wanted more productivity. And number three, they wanted it easier to work on. So
to repair and maintain
correct.
themselves.
Yeah. So with those three parameters sort of in sight, we got to work. And what would happen is on those monthly meetings, and our engineering team, who are also joined by some of our technicians, one gentleman, Jared Miller, based here in Pennsylvania, who has 20 plus years of experience with Peterson. It was folks like Jared. We had another gentleman, Derek Isworski, up in Michigan. He's our technical sales manager for Peterson. So those folks who had real hands-on experience of running machines in the field, working on machines in the field, they would come together with our engineering team, and they would come up with different ideas on making things better. And then once a month, we'd present it to the customers that were part of that little group, and they would sort of give it the thumbs up, thumbs down. And then they would throw ideas at us, and our folks would go back to work again for another month. So that went on for maybe, I would say, 6 months.
So that machine that you were changing
Yeah.
or evolving,
Yeah.
you would go make the upgrades to that machine?
No, this is before we even cut steel.
This was even before you even
Yeah.
thought of, okay.
So we designed the machines virtually. So the machines are designed on a 3D AutoCAD system.
Okay.
And so every component is tested and stress tested virtually before we ever cut steel. We want to get as close as we can to a good product when it's time to go and build a prototype.
Okay.
And so the other thing as well is that we were given the parameters because we weren't allowed to change the entire machine. The brief, as they call it, on that machine is we could only change a third of it.
Okay. So 30%.
30. It was actually 33%.
33% you're allowed to change.
That's the only, and so what that would mean is when we get together with a group of customers and would say, well, I want this, and this, and this, we would say, okay, you can have these 3 items, but you can't have those other 6 items, or take your pick. Which 3 do you want?
Yeah.
And now you might be wondering, why only 33%? Because that allows us to work within about an 18-month time frame. If you change the whole machine, it becomes a 5-year project.
from conception to get
to
back
get
to 5 years.
It takes about 5 years.
Okay.
Whereas in 18 months, we can turn it around with a third of the machine.
And then if you're totally redesigning it, then you got to prove it.
Correct.
There's all this other stuff. You already had a great machine. You were just trying to tweak it, make it better.
Yes. So the thing is we wanted, as I said, safety was an important thing, serviceability and production. So after subsequent meetings, we did come up with a design that everybody agreed upon, i.e. the customers that we were dealing with and our service teams, our manufacturing teams. Because you got to remember, while we're doing this, we've actually got manufacturing engineers following along with the project because they got to figure out, how do I build this? You've made it. How do I build this? What's my most efficient way to build it? So there's lots of things that come into play. The purchasing department comes into play. How easy is it for me to get this item? I bought it.
So how many people's this? Just this group. We're talking about...
It's not as big as you would think. It's probably a group of maybe 20 people.
Still a lot of people.
Still a lot of
20 people that are committed
Yes.
to improving one piece of machine.
Yes.
It's a lot of people.
And
how long did that take? How many months?
So it took us, we went about 6 months, I think it was, in the design phase. We call them gates, design gates. And those folks met 3 times a week, by the way. And what I mean by meeting, to be on a Teams call, so because one could be here, one could be there. They're all over the place. And but anyway, after about 6 months, we start cutting steel and we build a machine and it becomes the prototype. And the idea of the prototype was we're now going to take this prototype, once it's built, we're going to take it to all 12 of these customers. And each one of them is going to run it for a couple of weeks and give us the feedback.
Did you ever get any customers, the things that they really wanted, they said, take it back the old way, or?
You do get an element of that, but you're hoping that what you've done to improve it will outweigh that. Like there was one aspect, the screens are going to be slightly different. The screens for sizing the product are going to be slightly different. So if a customer had the D model, the screens wouldn't fit exactly from their D model to the E.
Have a new set of screens just for that.
Yeah, so that was the number one probably complaint. Okay, because if I have a fleet of 5 of these D models, now I got to get specific screens for the E model.
Okay. Well, that's easy to fix. You just order all new E models.
yeah. Oh, yeah. In our world, that's really easy to fix. But for the customer, not so easy.
Yes. No.
So yeah, that meant we took that machine in the dead of winter. We ran it because the machines were built in Oregon. It ran a little bit in Northern California and in the Oregon, and close to the factory, so we could weed out some of the little things on the machine before we sent it on the big road trip. Then it went in the wintertime to Minnesota, when you're talking about minus 30 degrees.
They grind in the winter?
Oh, yeah. And it's sometimes easier to grind in the winter because stuff is frozen and breaks apart easier.
Okay.
And so we wanted to get it in as cold a weather as possible to make sure the electronics worked correctly. And then when we're done running it up in the cold, then we wanted to try it in hardwood. So we had it out in Western Pennsylvania, running in a hardwood application where you got the big Appalachian hardwoods. You were talking about the 36-inch diameter wood. So we could ram that type of stuff through it and see what happened.
Okay.
And every time we actually mounted cameras throughout the whole machine. So for any of our design team that couldn't be on site, we always had people on site with the machine. We had cameras mounted throughout the machine, so the folks that weren't able to be there could literally just watch the machine from their office.
Another thing I remember you saying, you had more sensors on it during the prototype.
We put different vibration sensors throughout the machine because we want to monitor vibration. We want to see where the vibration's at, because all grinders vibrate. When you're smashing wood or any type of product into a smaller product, you're going to get vibration. So you got to understand the vibration, understand where it's coming from, and decide whether do I stop that vibration or do I channel that vibration somewhere else. What do I mean by that?
Yeah.
So say for instance, a machine vibrates and you have a fuel tank on the machine. Should the fuel tank be bolted fast to the whole frame? Well, the answer is that will break eventually. It'll crack. So what we did is we understood that vibration was happening in that area because the whole machine's vibrating while it's grinding. So we put actually rubber bushings. So the fuel tank itself sits on rubber bushings so that it allows for the vibration, but it doesn't change the integrity of the tank. We don't want any cracking in the tank. So it's different little items like that. We used cushioning systems. So as you're feeding a grinder, you have this giant spiked feed roll on the top of the machine, and that's what pulls the material in from the top.
Material in.
Yeah. The bottom, the conveyor's moving,
yeah,
and then the top is this feed wheel. So we put shock absorbers in that too, so that it allows for vibration, because there's a lot going on once that wood enters the grinding chamber. You have 1,000 horsepower plus breaking material against steel.
Yeah.
And so again, you got to account for that vibration and understand it. And again, put shock absorbers where they need to. Another big thing we did is we mounted the bearings on the outside. Now, this is something we always do with Peterson's. We put the bearings for the rotor outside the frame of the machine. So as the machine, over time, we're not talking about a month from now, we're talking 10 years from now, when that machine, eventually they do change shape due to what they do. The bearings can still be adjusted, and you won't blow out bearings. It won't be mounted right in the walls of the machine, where if it tweaks an 1/8 of an inch, you'll knock out a bearing. Whereas with ours are mounted to the outside of it, so that doesn't happen.
So you can shim
Correct.
the angle of the bearing
Yes.
to match
Yeah.
either the wall or the
They
shaft
sit
of the...
completely outside the wall, so
Yeah.
they're not even touching the wall.
And so what does that shaft weigh? That bearing's holding how much? Put you on the spot here.
Yeah, I don't.
It's just fascinating,
I'm taking a wild stab at it. I think about 5,000 pounds, 6,000 pounds.
And what's the weight on the machine? That machine.
So that machine you guys just got weighs 88,000 pounds.
Okay.
Give or take, when you fill them up with fuel.
Yeah.
Yeah, the weight changes because they do hold a lot of fuel. They hold 400 gallons or 350 gallons of fuel, so you have a lot of fuel on board, and that weighs as well. One of the things we did was we found there were some areas on the machine that were of no what we call structural integrity value to the machine, so we removed them. Why did we do that? To bring the weight down. That machine used to cruise in around 95,000 pounds. And so we wanted weight in areas where you need weight, and there's no need to have weight. If you have an area of the machine that doesn't need weight, don't have weight there.
Yes.
The other
overbuild it.
Yeah, you can overbuild it where you need to overbuild it, but if you can, like we had a water tank we used to put on the machine, and it was part of the whole car body. It really didn't add anything to the structural integrity of the machine. And we found out nobody used the water tank, even though we put this on this machine. And it had, for us, been a selling feature that you can...
You thought it was a good feature,
but
nobody used it.
Nobody used it. So
it's easier to hook up a hose and pump water into it.
So we took that completely out, and that's what brought the weight down significantly. And then the other thing as well is we wanted to change the approach angles on it. So even though the machine looks like it's taller than the one it replaced, it's actually the same height. We just gave it more ground clearance. So when you're going up, like we found out the hard way, if you're climbing a steep hill outside of Mansfield, PA,
or West Virginia,
you want to have a good approach angle, so this way the machine can traverse up that hill a little bit better.
So the machine can traverse what kind of angle?
Technically, our engine is only rated at, because it's the engine, not the...
It's not the
machine.
Hydraulics. The machine is
the engine allows for, I believe, a less than 20 degrees.
Less than 20 degrees, okay. But 20 degrees, 80 something, that's a lot.
Yeah, but the machine itself can go a lot steeper than that.
Okay, yeah.
But there are safety, and again, we built safety features into that.
So if it's too steep, what happens?
No, if it's too steep, the machine will only creep up a hill or creep down a hill. Okay. It won't go. We've two speeds. You can go on a high speed, make it track fast, or you can go slow. But for safety, we found it was much safer when you're tracking up a hill to be in the creep mode rather than being in the high speed mode.
Yeah.
And so there was those little things that we had learned from our experience on the pipelines. The pipelines gave us a steep learning curve, and it gave every manufacturer a steep learning curve because our machines ended up going places. Like, for instance, pre-pads and pipelines here in Pennsylvania, most of our grinders tracked no more than 5 miles in their entire lifespan.
In a 5 mile, they're used to staying.
They stayed in 1 yard and moved around. Yeah. And even if they're on a land clearing job, they just track down a little bit. Yeah. Whereas now we were dealing with customers that were moving a mile a day, every day. Yeah. And so
7 days a week.
Yeah, 7 days a week. So it became where the undercarriages became much more critical part of the machine. And then we had to start making sure that we understood that. And so that changed how we designed our clutch tanks, believe it or not. So we have a separate tank for the clutch oil on those machines. But in older designs, when you tracked up a hill, the clutch tank where it sucked up the oil to lubricate the clutch, it would think there was no oil in the tank because all the oil had sloshed to one side of the tank. So we came up with a design that would allow it where it could stay, that the clutch could stay engaged as the machine went up a steeper hill.
Interesting.
And so there was all these little things, again, we didn't know about prior to the pipeline industry that we learned in the pipeline industry. We found out we had to do a much better job of plating the underside of the machine. That a little twig or whatever, a sapling, could poke up and knock out just a little electrical line. It could be just a $20 item, but could, have you scratching your head for the next 2 hours trying to figure out what was the problem.
Yeah.
So it was all these different little things that came about. But with the prototype, as I said, once we were done up north, we then sent it to way down south in the middle of summer because we wanted to see how does it work in 100 plus, 95% humidity weather. So this way, if there's any problems, they will show themselves up. How does it do on a palm tree? Grinding palm trees is completely different than grinding a sycamore, for instance. And so there was all these different tests. Those tests went on for nearly a year.
Wow.
And that machine trekked all around the entire country. And so it was when we were happy with the data we got, and we made improvements. Actually, I think engineering will kill me on this one. I think we made 250 changes to that machine during the prototype testing.
Wow.
Of
amazing.
Stuff we found
Yeah.
that we needed to change.
Keep on changing.
And
so how do you my biggest thing, you say all these improvements, all this, how do you quantify that expense? I'm sure some accountant somewhere quantified those expenses, and then there's a value to that, right? Because you're doing all that testing and research and data, and there's a value.
Yeah. So that comes back to what I was saying about trying to offer the customers the best value for money. Okay. Yeah. And so when we're in our discovery phase and then our design phase of the machine, we are analyzing the costs. Like how many hours is it going to take us to build this? Mm-hmm. So this way, because we know what our cost is per hour for manufacturing. And so if you know what the costs are of the bought-in items and how long it's going to take to build that machine, you can have a fairly close idea of what it will cost. Now, that comes back to the market will pay what the market will pay.
Yes.
So in other words, we can't come to the market with a $2 million grinder that is the best thing since sliced bread. Customers won't see the value in that. So it still has to be very competitively priced and show the customer a fantastic return on investment. And so, again, this comes back to only changing a third of the machine.
Yes.
So it is a process, and people that are way smarter than I am are good at that. But the one thing is we do have a lot of folks that are very data driven. And what do I mean by that? Like they look at the data, like the vibrations we talked about with the sensors. They were looking at the throughputs. We put a thing on the discharge belt to measure its output. So every time we ran that machine, by the way, let me come back here a little bit, we would measure exactly what it did in a defined amount of time. So this type of product we ran through, and this is how long it took to process this amount of product. So this way we could bring that data back and say, okay, well, here. Now the numbers were a bit shocking at first because our original plan was to make the machine 10% better. Okay, 10% more productive. Okay. That was the goal. And so we were a little bit surprised that some of the numbers were a little crazier than that came back. We were averaging about 25% more production.
Wow.
So now how did we do that? We actually made the rotor about 20%. Well, it's only about, like compared to your other grinder, the rotor's 20% bigger. Okay. Compared to the screen surface area, it's about 10% more screen surface area. So you think by doing those different little things, you're going to get a bit of a bump in production. But we were a bit shocked at, how much better the production got out of it. And the other thing as well, which was also a bit of a surprise, is that the fuel consumption, based on what we'd seen in the past with the same engines running on the previous model grinder, the fuel consumption was was less, not by a whole lot, by a couple of percentage points. But so we were really happy with fuel consumption on it. And then some of the stuff that our electronic engineers worked on was its feedability, is what we call it. So the ability to throw material in there and not have to play with the remote control, that the machine will just do its thing. So by them tweaking that, and how did they tweak that? They basically monitor the hydraulics on the machine and the engine load, so that we're always grinding at peak performance with that engine. We're always at our peak torque level on the engine and matching this in-feed speed, so how fast we're feeding material into the machine.
I mean, that's one thing I noticed from our older grinder to this model. It's smoother. I think the older grinder would go lower RPMs, get loaded, then go high RPMs, low. It was constantly fluctuating.
Yeah.
Where this one's more of a constant. So if I'm an operator, what are some things I can do to save fuel consumption?
Well, exactly what you just said. So all grinders we're sort of used to. Anyone that's run a grinder will tell you it's a bit of shock and awe. There's a lot of roaring from the engine. It's grinding and it's making a lot of noise, and then the RPMs drop where it's ground too much and it has to stop and back. Not the engine, but it has to stop feeding and back up. Okay. And so you have these fluctuations in the power band being utilized all the time. By us, and this is the big thing you just pointed out, by us trying to keep that engine note the same all the time, sort of the same as setting cruise control on your car, you're going to find it's less wear and tear on the machine, because it's taking all it can take, but it's not taking more than it can take.
Yeah.
And so your efficiency level goes up because the machine is much smoother. The other thing as well is the fact that is what keeps your fuel consumption a little bit lower. It also helps with bearings. It helps with all the wear items that you're being nice and consistent. The other big thing will be noise levels, because people, let's say if you're grinding in a neighborhood, like you're clearing a lot that's going to be beside a existing residential neighborhood, people would complain about the noise of a grinder because they are quite loud. And so we paid a lot of attention to that, to noise. So we actually measure the noise levels of the grinder at different radiuses. So we can, if a customer comes to us and saying, well, what's the noise level at 100 yards? Or,
so they can figure out where they can put it, because there's some areas there's noise ordinances.
Correct.
Where you can do stuff at a certain time.
But by making the machine smoother, the noise level is constant, but it's not crazy. It's not an insane amount of noise. I don't know the decibel numbers off the top of my head, but I think it's somewhere around 92 decibels.
And I did not allow Charlie to take any notes. He's not looking at any websites. I'm putting him on the spot.
So
see how good of a salesperson you are.
So that's the one. My only complaint about the machine, and this is when we had your machine out there, and I've watched the prototype as well.
I wish it could have been green.
No. My complaint is that the grinders have become more boring to watch because they're so smooth now.
There's no shock and awe.
There's no shock and awe. It used to be shock and awe and wood flying everywhere. Yes. And whereas now they're very smooth, very controlled, and
person running over to the machine to shut it off.
It's
overheating, and buzzers are going off, or red lights are
and
none of that.
It took me a little bit of getting used to was that, because I was used to the louder, more violent operation of a grinder.
Yeah.
Which for an equipment salesperson, that's fun. For an operator and an owner, that's a bit of a nightmare.
Yeah.
And again, we were trying to make this machine so that it was friendlier to the pocketbook of our customers. And then on top of that, as I said, as an owner, the last thing you want to see is your machine crash, boom, bang all the time, because that's just sort of like every crash, boom, bang is some type of that's costing me money. And
and for some industries, like the mulch industry, your window of production is small. Like you have the spring production.
Oh yeah.
Or if you're in Minnesota and you can't run all the time.
Yeah.
I'm sure there was more volunteers to go to Arizona than Minnesota.
Yeah.
Negative 30 degrees weather. That's kind of harsh to stand out there all day and watch a piece of equipment run.
It's funny you mention that. Yeah, there's always more volunteers to go to Texas, California, and Florida than there is to go north.
Yeah.
And you're right. With the mulch industry, essentially, they have to do 12 months of business in 4 months. So every week a mulch person or mulch producer loses, let's say to downtime or whatever, Multiply that by 4. That's a real.
Yeah, a week is a month. For
Yeah,
them.
a week is a month.
A week is a month, and they got to.
Yeah.
So, what do you do for parts? How do you determine what parts should be? I think we had a discussion about at one time you had over 30 pieces of equipment in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
For the pipeline industry.
Mm-hmm.
How do you stock parts for all those, or strategically have them so when something happens?
So that's where the dealer comes into play. So dealers like Cleveland Brothers, for instance, they keep a huge inventory of Peterson parts at their main warehouse in Belfont, which that means they can get them out to any Cleveland Brothers store next day.
Okay. They have an internal system where
Yes.
if that part that you need is in the main warehouse in Belfont,
Mm-hmm.
it gets shipped out
Yeah.
that night or whatever that hot shot
Yeah.
shuttle service is to you.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I believe they've dropped boxes as well. So now for us to back them up as a manufacturer to supply Cleveland Brothers with those parts, we have our own distribution center in Columbia, South Carolina.
Oh, okay.
So we send out trucks every day heading to all the dealers with parts.
Okay.
We also, in Oregon, we have a parts warehouse there too.
Okay.
And so the idea is that if Cleveland Brothers has a customer that goes down, if it's a part they don't have and it's 5 o'clock in the evening, because no grinder seems to break at 11 in the morning, they all break at around 5 o'clock on a Friday. And so that means that the reps at Cleveland Brothers can call Peterson, because we're 3 hours behind in Oregon, and get a part. If we have the part on the shelf, we can ship it out.
So it's 5 o'clock Eastern time. It's 2 o'clock Oregon time.
Yes.
You can still make that hot shot.
Oh yeah, we can still ship out.
Overnight express.
Yeah.
for that.
And if it's a big item, it's quite pricey
Yeah,
to
But still, there's multiple levels of service, parts, redundancy, and making it as easy as possible.
And then the other thing as well is, so we have a dealer portal part of our website. So every dealer can go in and check to see what our inventory is at any time. So they know what our inventory of parts are. So they know whether we got it. And what we do with every single dealer is when we set them up, they know the population of machines in their area. So we have what we call a recommended stocking parts list. So these are the parts you need to have on your shelf to be successful as a dealer. And so on top of that, then we get together with them about every quarter. Well, we do a report every quarter that we send out to the dealer, which identifies the difference between the parts they stock and the overnight emergency parts.
Yes.
And because what we want is the number that they stock to be the high percentage.
Okay.
Like we don't want a dealer that only has 20% of their orders are for stock and 80% is overnight rush, because that tells us that that dealer is not keeping enough inventory on their shelves. And so so there's a lot of effort that goes into that by a very small group of people, I might add.
Okay.
That analyze that information and make sure that,
and they're always tweaking it, making it better.
Yes.
It's not a science. It's a judgment call on some of this stuff.
Yeah, and there's certain items in certain areas that seem to go through, like, say, for instance, if you're on the Eastern Shore of Maryland, parts wear faster than they do if you're in, let's just say, State College, PA.
Yeah.
And the reason is there's a higher silica content in the soil in the Eastern Shore of Maryland, which wears chipper knives out faster. So they wear life. And the cat dealer network already know that, because undercarriages wear out much faster on Eastern Shore of Maryland than they will in State College, PA.
It's amazing.
So, and there's nothing anyone can do about it. It just is what it is.
Yeah.
So,
so we've talked a lot about this particular grinder that we got, your background. What else do you do for hobbies? Are you a work-life balance? Is it you live to work or you work to live? What drives you? You're very emotional, very passionate about your career, your industry.
I'm fortunate that a lot of my hobby involves equipment, our equipment that we happen to build. So that's a big part of my hobby. But I actually do have, like, my daughter's involved in sports. So I spend a lot of time watching her play sports. And I play music as well. I don't do that as often as I would like to. And then my whole family, we love to travel. Like, I like to travel. I'm a bit of a gypsy. I'm always on the road. But they love to travel too. So, yeah, every year we'll go on a nice trip somewhere and go see something new. We're not as much beach people per se. So for me, it's not to sit on the beach for a week is of no.
Yeah.
So like for instance, last year we went to Idaho. And we went touring Wyoming and Montana. I'd never really toured, like I've been traveling out west, but I'd never really gone as a tourist to travel and see the Rockies. And what I really wanted, and of course this is when you're born on a farm, there's something about that you want to go see a ranch and you want to see real cowboys at work out in Wyoming. And that was really cool to go do that. And even though it drove my poor wife nuts that we would just drive down the road, and if I saw a couple of guys on horseback herding up cattle, I'm not talking about a dude ranch. I'm just talking about two poor individuals that happen to be working, and I pull over at the side of the road and I got to go talk to them and find out, all about the cattle and all that sort of stuff. But so we do a lot of that, and as I said, so my work-life balance is actually, I would say it's pretty darn good. Other people in my family may debate me on that, but I think at the end of the day, we've a lot of folks that rely on us to help them with their businesses, be it brewbockers or be it other customers as well. So, we, as long as we can be of service to those customers, we'll continue to be successful. And, if all that is a customer calling me at 7:00 at night saying, "Hey, Charlie, this machine broke down and, where can I get a part for that?" That's only a short little phone call. It's not the end of the world, and but we'll get help for that individual and get them sorted out. So.
And I would say that's an important phone call, and sometimes those phone calls, from previous life would come, and you'd be sitting at the dinner table and you answer it, and it's a customer in need with a broken down piece of equipment that's relying on you to connect them to figure out their problem. And that's really where relationships are made. Yeah. That's where a lot of things happen.
And that's where you hope the differences are made in the fact that, as I said, we're in the business of being of service to the customers. So, we hope that both by us giving them good advice on what type of equipment that we'd recommend for them to take a look at, plus giving them good service by making sure they have their parts they need, that, they'll continue to come back to us and we'll continue to hopefully earn their business.
Yeah. So to wrap it up, though, in the construction industry, where do you see the industry in 5 years? I mean, we have a whole bunch of things that the industry needs to work on: safety, bringing younger individuals into the industry. Price, fuel, emissions, all these things. So where do you see us in 5 years from now?
Well, the thing is that as anyone drives down the road, the one thing you see with any construction job is people. Lots of people. And so I think we as an industry have maybe an identity crisis in the fact that we still seem to be struggling to attract folks that want to be in the industry. It is hard work. There's no doubt about that. It's very hard work, but it is very rewarding work. I think once we can figure out how to bring more young folks into our industry, and don't get me wrong, there is a little bit of that happening, but it's not happening on the scale that maybe we would like to see it happening. I think that's where we need to concentrate our efforts, is how do we attract good people into our business, good young people into our business, because there's so many different avenues they can work in the construction industry, from operators to specialists. They can even be a sales guy in the business. They could, there's all sorts of aspects of it. There's tremendous. The part maybe that we don't impart as a construction industry is the camaraderie amongst teams, amongst construction crews. There's tremendous camaraderie, because for all the ups and downs in it, once you've done a job, how many times have people in the construction business been driving with people that are not in the construction business, said, "Oh yeah, see that place over there? Yeah, I remember when that was just fields. I worked on that job there." Yeah. And the thing is that we are seeing we are beginning to see this, the infrastructure money being doled out a little by little. It didn't come as fast as I think we would have liked. But with the more and more infrastructure money being released to the trade, I think that's going to help us a lot. We are seeing a huge amount of solar farm, and not as much in PA, but quite a bit in New England and Virginia. New England is huge. Some of the challenges we've seen in New England, for instance, is the decline of the biomass industry. So that would be using wood product to make electricity, wood being a renewable fuel. But that industry, unfortunately, is in a bit of a decline, which is extremely unfortunate because at one stage, about 50% of all the electricity in Maine came from wood. Wow. And we are seeing, like, typically what happens is when you see one industry decline, another one...
Something will grow.
Something grows.
Something's dying, something's growing. There's a cycle to something.
But this is a people industry. And for us to be successful as a people industry, we got to become as good as we can be to attract the folks that can make a career in this industry into it. And I've seen some of the stuff that some customers have done out there, participate in career days, not at the tech school level or the vocational school level, but at the high school level with sophomores. And so we have one customer down in Georgia that bought a simulator. It's a CAT simulator for an excavator. They take it to all the school days. Wow. And they let the kids get on it and play with the simulator excavator. And the kids that want to participate in their apprentice program, they get paid apprenticeship over the summer. Wow. And so they're finding folks at a young age. And the cool thing they actually do, this customer does, is if that individual sticks with them from junior and senior year in their apprentice program, and it's going to become a full-time employee, on the signing day where all the athletes at the high schools are signing their national letter of intention, the NLI letter, they have also a table set up where the kids that are going into the construction industry sign their national letter of intention as well to commit to the construction industry. And so there are some great programs out there, but they're somewhat localized.
Yeah, they're regional, localized.
And that is our future because we have automated a lot of things and there's a lot more we can automate in the industry, but it still requires people. You brought it up there earlier in the fact that knowing to turn a grinder in the correct direction when the wind's blowing hard so the dust doesn't go over everybody, knowing to set the machine up because I need the pile here because when the people are coming in for the mulch, I want to be able to back the truck in and they don't sink. So it's not an industry that it's going to be dominated by robotics or anything like that or by a huge amount of automated processes. It still requires people to think and look and go, okay, well, this is...
Yeah, there's still great opportunity.
Oh, huge.
If you're willing to work hard, learn, you enjoy the outdoors, you enjoy the change of the seasons. Mm-hmm. There's, I think, a great opportunity for people still in this industry. And it doesn't require you having to go to a school. No. You can start in the field and you can grow through a company and make it the best you can be and be rewarded for that too. Yeah. And I think people don't talk about that. Yeah. The construction industry financially has the ability to award people that want to be in certain positions.
Correct. Yeah. And it can be very financially rewarding for folks. And back to what you were saying there as well, like even if you're doing, like if you decide to go to trade school in it, you're not going to be saddled with huge, like I stopped by a university this past weekend in upstate New York in Saratoga Springs. And when I looked up the tuition, it was $82,000 per year. Not the tuition, but the all-in cost. And, you think to yourself, 4 times that is your degree.
$320,000.
Yeah.
Plus, if you're taking out loans and interest, plus if you're so you have a $350,000 loan, plus you're paying interest on it.
It's crazy. Whereas somebody can go into the construction industry, get a trade as a welder, technician, operator, all of that for like literally a fraction of that, and sometimes no cost at all.
Yes.
And being in industry, back to what you were saying, you're outside. And that's good and bad. Let's call it what it is. Some days you don't want to be outside, but the fact of the matter is that it's still, if I was locked in an office all day long in a cubicle, I'd lose my mind.
I know. I'm starting to get jittery here, and I know you are. We've been here for a little bit over an hour and a half or so. But let's land this plane here.
Okay.
I appreciate everything that you do for us. I appreciate you being here for us. not only on this day, but if there's a technical question or if we need anything. There's part of building that relationship, and we look forward to keep on building that relationship. You do your part, and we do our part, and we keep on moving forward. So this episode from Brubacher and Beyond, thank you again, everybody. If you like this, like it. If you don't like it, then pass it on to somebody you might not like. But share it. We do hope that it keeps on growing, but also we hope that it helps people in the industry. And if you're thinking about getting in the industry, there are resources that you can reach out to. So everybody have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Brubacher Podcast today. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe to our podcast so you can listen to the new episodes each month. Share it with your friends in the industry and those who might like to learn more about the construction industry. Feel free to check out our website at www.brubacher.net. I'm Keith Brubacher, president of Brubacher Excavating Incorporated, and we hope you found our discussion insightful, and we look forward to the next time together.